There we go. Now we're live. All right, let's stand and pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. O Heavenly King, the Comforter, the Spirit of truth, are everywhere and fills all things. Treasure of blessings and giver of life. Come and abide in us, cleanse us from every impurity, and save our souls, a good one. Through the prayers of the Holy Fathers of Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. It seems like it's been weeks since we've had class, and it has, because it just happened to be this year that the feast of St. Nicholas and the eve of the feast of St. Nicholas and the eve of the feast of St. Herman of Alaska fell on a Thursday. So we had church instead of class. And we won't have class next week because it's Christmas. But then we'll pick up after that, and we're going to start going through. I think we have to do a class on prayer. I keep promising you that class. And then a couple of other things, and then we're going to start working on the liturgics. But today, we're going to do the Nativity cycle. And we're going to talk about the Feast of the Nativity, because obviously next week is the Feast of the Nativity. So the way that the Orthodox Church celebrates the Nativity cycle is a very ancient one. It really dates back from in its fullness from the 3rd century, 2nd century. So you even have people writing, Agira, who's visiting the Holy Land in that period, and she's writing about the services that we're going to be celebrating over the next few days. So it has a very ancient sort of way. Uh-oh. Hello, Olivia. How are you? Hug? Making a hug? Thank you. Daddy, you doing okay? Okay. We know who's here. So, silliness. So, one of the things that you're going to hear starting on Christmas Eve is a phrase. And this phrase, Orthodox, it's a phrase and a response. And we have two major ones in the church. So the Christmas phrase is, I would say, Christ is born. And the answer will come back to me, glorify him, right? In Easter, we do Christ is risen, indeed he is risen. This goes way, way, way back. So Christ is born, glorify him. You'll hear that. In Russian, sometimes I'll do it in Russian. We'll do Christos rождается, and the answer is Slavitiyu. And then in Greek, it's Christos genitos doxo theo. So I just do it in English because everything else is horrible. So that's the way where we have to begin the understanding of this feast. Is this understanding of what we're celebrating, right? The reason for the season, right? That sort of thing. The idea of Christ being born, and then we glorify him. And so the services that we're going to go through and all the stuff that we're going to talk about is really about how do we glorify Christ with his nativity. So it's simply put, right? So I'm going to read you a couple things. St. John of Kronstadt, one of the more modern saints in the Orthodox Church, wrote, and he has an incredible sermon, St. John, and he writes this beautiful Christmas sermon. And I want you to listen to a section of that sermon. And the Word became flesh in order to make us earthly beings into heavenly ones, in order to make sinners into saints, in order to raise us up from corruption into incorruption, from earth to heaven, from enslavement to sin and the devil, into the glorious freedom of the children of God, from death into immortality, in order to make us sons of God and to seat us together with him upon the throne as his royal children. O boundless compassion of God, O inexpressible wisdom of God, O great wonder, astounding not only the human mind, but the angelic mind as well. So, what is St. John saying here? We're saying what we talked about. Christ is born, glorify him. But that whole idea of how we glorify him is not singularly though properly and primarily with Christ, but it's also ourselves. That humanity is being glorified by Christ taking on human flesh, by God condescending in his incarnation. Incarnation means to take on flesh, incarnate. And it means that through that, he changes who we are. Because before, we were estranged from God. We had separated ourselves from God. We were, as St. John talks about, and we'll hear in the readings, we were kind of slaves to sin and all those things that separate us from God. But by God taking on flesh, he sanctifies flesh. And who else has flesh? We do. And so God's incarnation is a way to sanctify who we are as humanity. We are different now. We have a different focus. I don't mean that we become, Supermen, but rather that our very basic part of who we are is now restored. Everything, remember, with Adam and Eve, all this kind of separated ourselves from what we were supposed to be. I was having this discussion the other day. It's like, yeah, but God knew that, with a person today, and it's like, but yeah, God already knew that this was going to happen, right? And God already knew that that there would be a separation. He also knew that he would have to have a Christ to restore that bond between him and us. So St. Athanasius, one of the great early church saints, one of the most amazing of all writers, wrote in his classic book on the Incarnation, where he spends a whole book talking about this. And I want you to listen to how he phrases this. God became man, God with a big G, okay? So man could become like God, little g. Not God, but like God. We are creating his image and likeness, right? Genesis. And we fell and we left God, but by God taking on human flesh, he reunites man with God, literally in his flesh. And so by doing though, he begins the recreation, or better yet, the restoration of the world, okay? That sets the scene. Right? Are there any questions before I move forward? This is a lot. This is like heavy theology here, right? It gets to the very nature of who we are as human beings. It gets to the very basis of why we are created. We are created to worship God. Simple as that. We forget that. So I want to play you two hymns. See, you didn't know you were going to get to hear music today. And these two hymns are what's called the Troparion and the Kontakion of Nativity. Remember, you're going to learn all sorts of words. So the Troparion is kind of like the theme song, right? So when you hear on Sundays we sing a bunch of them right after the little entrance, and there's a whole bunch. They're prescribed which ones to whom and why. And each feast has a Troparion and a Kontakion. So the Tropar is your theme song. And the Kontakion, I'm not going to get into the whole liturgical thing. Just consider it like the secondary theme song, all right? That's going to build on the first theme song. All right, you with me? All right, so the first one you're going to hear is the Troparion of the Nativity. That's not the Troparion of the Nativity. That is a... I hate that they do this now. All these ads. Okay, now you can hear it. That's our cathedral choir in Minneapolis, singing that. So let's This is another version. No, that's not what I wanted. So completely forget that. Give me a second. All right, here it is. This is the same choir. This is the Cantacian. We're going to go through the words. There you go. That was, by the way, this, in the Orthodox world, we have all different cultures and different musical styles. That's basically a Russian style hymns that was set to English. I mean, I remember as a kid hearing that in Slavonic and all that sort of stuff. Does anything strike you about those two hymns? By the way, those are our Christmas carols, right? We talk about, all these secular Christmas carols. That's literally the church's Christmas carols. In Alaska, in the villages, they would make this huge, beautifully decorated star, and they would sing these hymns as they go to house to house to house in the village, celebrating Christmas. And as a kid, I remember even them doing that. People going to different houses, the choir going and singing the Christmas hymns to everyone. It's hard now because everyone lives so spread out. So does anything strike you about those hymns? Or do you need to hear the words? You need to hear the words. Okay. Fair enough. What do you say, Ryan, all the time? Fair?
Sure.
You always say fair?
Fair.
Fair. It's fair. So, all right, so the Troparion. Your nativity, O Christ our God, has shown to the world the light of wisdom. For it by those who worship the stars were taught by a star to adore you. The Sun of Righteousness, S-U-N, of righteous, and to know you, the Orient from on high. O Lord, glory to you. All right, does anything strike you about that? Any words come off?
Stars and sun?
Yeah, the sun, S-U-N, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about this. And always, the Christians, they just took a pagan holiday and made it Christian. Yeah, we did. That's what we did a lot of times. It absolutely, right? Of course we did, right? So, but this idea of the Son of Righteousness, right? And remember, tomorrow is the shortest day of the year, right? And what are we going to be celebrating on Christmas? The real sun that breaks through the darkness, right? So they use that. The other thing is those who worship the stars were taught by the stars to adore thee. What is that? Obviously, the three wise men, right? The three wise men that came and followed the star. And the stars, again, in your face, pagans, right? We're going to tell you what it really all means, right? Yeah, you're going to worship the stars? This is where the star leads you. You're going to worship the sun? This is the sun. S-O-N, right? And shown to the world of light of wisdom. And then what's the other one? The last line. And to know you, the Orient from on high. Anybody know that word Orient? What does it mean?
Orientation.
Yeah, it's orientation. Actually comes from the word meaning east. Right? If you say you got the Orient and you got the Occident, the West and the Orient, right? So Orient means from the east. Where's the sunrise from?
East.
There you go. Where are we orienting ourselves? The sun. Look at this church. Which direction is the altar? East. Every Orthodox church, except St. Vladimir's Seminary, where they built it backwards, but you didn't hear that from me. It's liturgical east. Every Orthodox church is always oriented to the east. And if you notice here in the morning, right, especially you'll notice the sun will come up and shine right on the altar. And if you're here in the evening service as the sun is going down, you're going to see the sun kind of fade away from the church. It's all connected, right? So that troparion is telling us what we need to think about this feast day, right? So here's the Kentucky, that was a very fancy version. I think we'll do it. I think the choir's been practicing it. There's some less fancy. But listen to this. Today the Virgin gives birth to the transcendent one, and the earth offers a cave to the unapproachable one. Angels with shepherds glorify him. The wise men journey with the star, since for our sake the eternal God was born as a little child. So what strikes you there? What does transcendent mean? Anybody? Yeah, beyond, we can't quite, it's so amazing, I can't figure it all out. But it's transcendent in the theological sense, is that it goes through all time and space. Because listen how that starts. Today, the Virgin gives birth. Right? We're not saying, 2,000 years ago, the Virgin gave birth. The church is saying, today, here, right now, we're celebrating this. It's the same when we get to talk about Pascha, about Holy Week and the cross and the resurrection. We don't talk about it as it's something that's happened, though it did. It's something that is revealed to us each and every day. And so when we stand at the empty cave, or the empty cross, or the empty tomb, we're standing there. Right? That's the idea of transcendence. It's beyond time and space. And the earth offers a cave to the unapproachable one. Who's the unapproachable one? God, right? We couldn't, remember in the Old Testament, Moses wanted to see God, so he said, you go in a cave and I'll put my hand in front of you, and you'll see my back, whatever that may mean. You can't, right? You can't see God. You can't understand God. But here, God is really being present now. Here, we can see God. We know what God looks like because here he is. And remember, these icons aren't my creation. It's based on an earlier icon goes all the way back. And there's a beautiful hymn, I don't know if I'll read it on Christmas, about how all of creation has a part in the Christmas story on purpose. The wise men journey with the star, the angel of the shepherds glorify him. Obviously, since for our sake the eternal God was born as a little child. That's the whole point, right? That's the whole point. So, here's the story, right? The icon, the Christmas icon. Here it is. Everything you just heard in that Chopar and the Kentuckian are found right here, right? Remember, an icon is not just a picture, it's a prayer. And it's telling us a story, and it's telling us about what it is that we need to think about. So, obviously, all this stuff makes sense, right? It's all in the Christmas story that we'll hear over the next few days. But there's two parts of it, of this icon, that you don't necessarily notice in the Christmas story. This one and this figure. Right? You see those two figures? Can you see? I have to hold it up. Okay. All right. So this, what are they doing with that in that picture? They're washing a baby.
Excuse me, I don't know if that was a baby or a statue.
That's a baby. That's the baby Jesus. Okay? We love the baby Jesus. And if you look, there's a woman pouring water. And Jesus, remember, Jesus, even when he's a baby, he's shown as a little man. But that's a whole other story. When the seminarians come and teach you the class on icons, you'll hear about that. Why are they washing the baby? Anybody? What do you do when the baby's born, right? Moms, what? You clean them off, right? This is to show that it was a real birth. Christ truly was born as a baby. So when he came out of Mary's womb, he still had, the umbilical cord and all that uckiness and all that sort of thing, right?
Afterbirth.
What? The afterbirth. So there it is. That's what to say. This is a real birth. Because remember, in the early church, there were people saying, oh, he didn't really get born. It was just like an image or a ghost or something like that. No, he was really born. The whole point of St. Athanasius' book on the Incarnation is just to make that point. He really was born. And this is why he was born. But this one troubles people. And you probably don't even know it. All right? You see a man sitting there like this, kind of figuring things out. And there's this wizened old figure over there. Right? That's Joseph. Remember it says Joseph pondered these things in his heart? So here he is trying to figure out, he's the protector of Mary. And you see Joseph is an older man. Because he's not a young man, unlike our little nativity fight out there. But he was an older man, right? The tradition in the church was he was a widower. He married Mary to take care of her, to protect her virginity. And then he disappears from the story because he dies. But we're going to get into that. So he's pondering these things. And you know who that is? That's the devil. That is the devil trying to tempt him to not believe this. He's trying to say, well, how can this be? How can a virgin give birth to a child? Well, you certainly have those cases in the Old Testament. There's a couple times of virgin births. So this icon is telling us, yes, we're going to ponder it, but don't be tempted to question it, because it's real. Right? And then you got, the shepherds and the angels and, all that sort of stuff. The little cow there in the cave and stuff like that. And so, skip that because you're not going to do that. I'm going to skip that. So, when we start thinking of this, and the theology and the background of this whole thing, we have to remember what's the whole point, right? The whole point is that Christ being born. Now, let's take a step back a little bit in the history. And when I mean history, I mean first century, right? So the church is established, and all these traditions are being established. The gospel is being put together. They're celebrating this service. So very early on, The church celebrated Christmas, Theophany, that's the baptism of Christ. We call it Theophany, and Easter, Pascha, on the same day. So it was believed that Christ was born, baptized, and rose from the dead on the same day. Isn't that interesting? So the liturgical cycle that you will see on Christmas and Theophany are identical because they have the same root. And they are a lesser version of what we'll see during Holy Week and Pascha. All right? So what happens? So the theology lets us actually start to establish a cycle. And so for the first 3 centuries, those 3 feasts were celebrated together. And then the church starts to separate them out. The liturgical cycle is being filled out. We need to celebrate this. We need to celebrate that. And so you see that move there, and then Christmas and Theophany get moved. Very specifically, they talk about it in the First Ecumenical Council in 325, that yes, they're going to do December 25th for Christmas, precisely because it was the pagan feast of the sun. It was never meant, and drives me crazy when I watch TV shows or listen to radio and they all talk about this. The whole point was apologetics, not history. The whole point of why they did it was how we were going to explain our faith to the people. And they were able to take this feast and say, look, this is how you celebrated it. You maybe had a glimmer into what it really means. Here's what it really means. So the Christians absolutely took it. And they said, we're gonna use this to teach the people about the real meaning of Christianity. Yeah.
So what's the deal with Russian Christmas? Like January 6th?
So it's not.
Okay.
It's December 25th, but it's on a Julian calendar.
Okay.
So when you say January 6th, it's January 7th rather. It's 13 days after December 25th. We use the Gregorian calendar. All right, so that's the common calendar that we all use. In some sections of the church, they still use what's called the old calendar, the Julian calendar. When I was a kid, we did that. And it's 13 days difference. So on the Gregorian calendar, it's January 7th. But on the Julian calendar, it's December 25th. All right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Orthodox argue more about calendars than anything else, and I'm glad we do. Because that means we're not arguing about who and what Christ is. Right? You want to argue about calendars, go all day with it, right? So, but that's what it means. It's 13 days. And by the way, it's an inaccurate calendar. So eventually, it's going to be 14 days. And then eventually, over time, Christmas will be starting to be celebrated in the fall. Not talking 1,000 years. Thousands and thousands of years. But all Orthodox churches all use the same old calendar, Julian calendar, to celebrate Pascha. The compromise was we could do all these other feasts in the Gregorian calendar, but anything related to Pascha, we're all going to be on the old calendar. So that's why.
Russia, or is that Novgorod too?
Everyone. All, us too. OCA, Greeks, everybody.
Is January 7th.
No.
I'm saying OCA is Gregorian, and Russia plus Novgorod are...
And Serbia, and some Greeks. Yeah, there's a bunch of... And then some are what we call the mixed calendar, like we are. Okay? But we're all on the old calendar for Easter. Right, which this year... Right, because we use a different calculation of the equinox. That's a whole nother class when we get down to that one, all right? So anyway, by the First Ecumenical Council in 325, Pascha is split off. And so we know it says it's the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox, right? That's when the day when the earth is most bathed in light. So that's where they decided on Pascha, which actually matches biblically. right? Christmas, by the 4th century, already Christmas and Theophany are starting to be split from each other. And with Theophany being January 6th. And we'll get into liturgical math in a second. So even by 379, this is already established, this cycle. So then we had the winter solstice, December 25th. And you know the 12 days of Christmas? Count 12 from December 25th. What do you come to? January 6th. The Feast of Theophany. So when they're singing about the 12 days of Christmas, the 12 first day, that's what they're singing about. In the West, they kind of lost the whole point of it. But in the Orthodox world, we still have that 12 days of Christmas. Leads us from Christmas to Theophany. And that is a fast-free period. Eat whatever you want to eat. Go to town. Yes?
So where does the Catholic Church get the 3 kings?
So that's a much later thing. We celebrate the 3 kings on Christmas Day.
That makes sense.
Right, because that's the day they're there, right? But we have a couple of others that we're going to talk about in a second, all right? So again, we're doing this to show, again, the word apologetics, explanation or kind of telling you why it is that we do it. We absolutely put these feasts together to do that. So let's talk a little bit about Holy Mass, my favorite thing to do. Right? I hate math, but anyway. Christmas actually starts on March 25th. Why is it? What is the feast of March 25th? You'll see it. What? Annunciation, right? It's the big icon there. So, count 9 months from March 25th, and what do you get to? December 25th. A perfect pregnancy. So we start that celebration, in a sense, there's a cycles. I haven't had this class yet about cycles within cycles. So we have March 25th, the Annunciation, the announcing that Mary is going to bear a child. And you count exactly 9 months, you get December 25th. By the way, if you have the conception of John the Baptist to his birth on the church calendar, 9 months plus 1 day. If you do the same thing with Mary, her conception and her birth, it's 9 months minus 1 day. It's always one perfect. All right? One perfect pregnancy, Christ. So we got that. So then we go through all of that, and we come to what we call the Nativity fast. In the West, they call it Advent. Now, we start that 40 days before, right? November, 15th is when we started. Now, we haven't had the class on fasts and all those other things. Lent is the great fast. The second one is Nativity. And then we have 2 other major fasts, the Apostles' fast and the Dormition fast, but we're not going to talk about that. But know that that's when we start to enter into that cycle. So if you probably didn't even notice, when you walked into church after November 15th, all the colors were changed to red. Right? We were in gold, which is our normal color. Now we're in red. All right? And that's kind of saying, okay, now we're in something different now. We're celebrating something different. So, and that, by the way, that Nativity fast was very early on established. Like, they're talking about it in the 3rd century, about spending the 40 days in fasting. So it's again, something we do. Advent, I think, is what? They have 4 weeks. It's a 4-week, right? You have the Advent candles, you light yeah, easy. We do 40 days. Anyway, so while we get into that Nativity fast, there's a couple of things to look for. First off, the St. Nicholas feast, right? We had that 2 weeks ago. That's December 6th, right? Had nothing to do with Christmas in a way. It had to do with St. Nicholas, a early bishop who lived in Turkey, who was known for his generosity and his holiness. And he becomes so famous throughout the church to this day for that. So how did St. Nicholas become Santa Claus? That was a total Western thing. In the Orthodox Church, St. Nicholas is known as the person at the First Ecumenical Council who stood up and punched Arius because he defamed the name of Christ and said he was born like anyone else, and got kicked out of the council and then was brought back in. So, much tougher than a jolly St. Nick, right? But nonetheless, you get that idea that it's connected in a way because of his generosity and his love for his people. He's the paradigm of what a bishop should be. And it's within that Christmas season, so you could see how they can connect that. And then it takes on weird turns, and we'll just leave it there. All right. Also, the other thing to notice during the Nativity Fast, particularly the month of December, is that all these different Old Testament prophets are being celebrated. When you look at the church calendar, open it up to December, and you'll see all these Old Testament prophets. So just to tell you why the church does this. Prophet Obadiah, known for his fear of God and the prophecy of the true worship of God. Prophet Nahum, known for God consoles and how God will come to his people. Habakkuk, known for prophesying the destruction of the temple, the Babylonian captivity, and the return of the people to Jerusalem. Prophet Zephaniah, known for the calamities that will befall Israelites if they don't worship correctly. Haggai, known for encouraging the building of the temple in preparation for the coming of the Messiah. Prophet Daniel and the three youths in the furnace, known for the encouragement of the Israelites during captivity. And then we read that, by the way, that on Holy Saturday. So actually, the Daniel and the three youths are a Russian tradition. Is that what they call a yolka, not a polka? A yolka is they tell the story of Daniel and the three youths. So on that day. So really, you got all these prophets who are telling us about what's about to happen. You with me? Then we have the second Sunday before Nativity. We have called the Sunday of the Forefathers. We did it last week. Right? And I preached about that, about all those people who prophesied about the coming of Christ and how all those people who came before and in faithfulness lived pointing to the Messiah. Now, this Sunday is my favorite Sunday, which is called the Sunday of the Fathers, the Sunday before Christmas, the Sunday before Nativity. And I will read the genealogy of Jesus Christ according to St. Matthew. And I get to say names like Abnimadab and Rehoboam and all these great names. But it also, at the end of that genealogy, which starts with Abraham, I'm not going to foreshadow my sermon, so you got to come Sunday to hear my sermon. It starts with Abraham and it goes to Joseph, the betrothed, Joseph. And then we hear the first announcement of the Christmas story. All right? So you got the Sunday of the Forefathers, the Sunday of the Fathers. And that leads us then into Nativity. All right? I just threw a whole bunch of information at you. Let's pause here. Questions. Because now we're going to get into the services. Nothing? You guys know everything? Good. I don't need to teach anymore. Okay. Just a hint, too, by the way. Just keep these words in mind. Priest, prophet, and king. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Okay, so how do you know liturgically these are all connected? Because there's a certain liturgical cycle that has to happen over 2 days. Now, of course, the day in which Christmas falls can determine how the cycle, because certain things can't trump other things, and that's why you have monks and monasteries figuring this out. And I just have to open the book and say, what do I do? But the thing that you'll have is the royal hours. You will have the vesperal liturgy of St. Basil, normal. Then you will have the festal vigil, which is a Compline and a Matins. I'm going to explain this in a second. right? And then you have the liturgy, the festal liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. So that same cycle you'll see in Theophany, and that's the same cycle you will see on Holy Friday, Holy Saturday, and Pascha. And Annunciation, too, by the way, has that same cycle. So let's go through those one by one. I have books for this, so when you come to the services, you'll be able to follow, because the hymnography is just like mind-blowing, and I'm not going to be able to do it justice. And you have to always see it in the context of how it's being worshipped. The first service we have is called the Royal Hours. Something you will notice when you walk in, there will be no icon in the center of the church. It will be empty. The icon of the Nativity will be on the altar. All right? So the Royal Hours, if you remember, well, you haven't had that class, the hour, when you come into church and someone's chanting, that they're doing one of the hours. It's like a military watch. First, third, sixth, and ninth hour. It all has to relation to a series of psalms and hymns which prepare us for the liturgy. So the Royal Hours means that you put all of them together, plus you have an Old Testament, an epistle, and a gospel reading, and a special hymn related to each one of these. So you do Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We can't do John because it's not in there, but they do 2 from Matthew. And it's all about preparing us. So why were they called the Royal Hours? Well, that's when the emperor came to church. The emperor came to listen to these incredible hymns to prepare himself. So not only were the hours put together into one service, but it's also the preparation service. So this year, the way the cycle works out, we'll do Royal Hours on Monday morning. It's a beautiful service. It's very simple. For Orthodox, it's like the simplest as you can get. And it's really just a beautiful, simple service, which helps us hear the stories. Okay? So then Tuesday morning, we will have the Vesperal Liturgy. So we take a Vesper service. That's the evening service. And why am I doing it in the morning? Just go with it. Okay? And we're taking the Liturgy of St. Basil and we're putting them together. What's key about this is you're going to hear 8 Old Testament readings which relate to the prophecy of the birth of Christ. Okay?
Just to recap on the time. What time is it?
9 o'clock.
On what day?
Tuesday.
Christmas Eve day?
Christmas Eve morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous, but yes,
No.
Christmas Eve morning.
That is.
The morning of Christmas Eve. At the end of that service, I will bring the icon of the Nativity from the altar, place it in the center icon, right? Now, as you hear the story, now Mary's in the cave, right? She's in the stable, the manger. The manger was a cave. I have to tell you a story about when I was in Jerusalem there, or Bethlehem. And I put a candle in front of it. And that candle will stay lit until the Christmas Day service.
Which is what time?
Christmas Day, 9 o'clock.
Also 9?
Yeah. All right, so we have the Christmas Eve Vesperal Liturgy, which is our way of saying, here's all the prophecies about the birth of Christ. We celebrate the liturgy, and now we are getting ready to really celebrate the feast. With me? Then we have the Festal Vigil, which is an incredible service. That'll be at 6:30 in the evening. And the basic 2 parts are Compline, which is the service of the evening, and Matins, which is the service of the morning. Go with it. Okay? And so the Compline, many parishes, if you do it in the fullness, it will go like 4 hours. We don't do that. Right? Every parish kind of adjusts to what they think we can handle. But the key in that is you'll hear the hymn, God is with us, understand all nations and submit yourselves, for God is with us, and we'll sing that. Everyone thinks, oh, that's the Christmas song. No, that's sung every day in the Orthodox Church at Compline service. Every day you'll hear that. But since most people don't see a compline service, you're not in a monastery or a seminary, you only hear it on certain times. So that God is with us, and we have a litia, where we bless the bread, wheat, wine, and oil. And then we go into the Matin service. The Matin service, the key is that you're going to hear the gospel reading, you're lighting the lights, you're celebrating. I'm going to be sensing all over the place. We're going to be happy, happy joy. And we're talking about Christ is being born. That's the first time you'll hear me yell out, Christ is born. You all know to say, glorify him, right? Okay. And so, that one's at night.
Christmas Day.
Christmas Eve.
So we have Christmas Eve day, Christmas Eve night.
Right.
Christmas Day, Christmas Day night.
No, nothing Christmas Day night. I get to collapse and eat and...
2, and then Christmas Day is 1.
Yeah.
9 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
Christmas Eve is 9 a.m., 6 p.m.
Right. 6:30.
Or 6:30.
Yeah. Sometimes we've done it here at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. This year I'm doing it at 6:30 because some people, because they have to work. I forget people have to work on Christmas Eve, which is like, really? But that's the way the world is now. So Christmas Day is a completely different type of liturgy. You will not hear the normal hymns that you hear for the antiphons. You'll hear special ones. There'll be a special verse. There'll be a special reading. And it's all about celebration. Because we don't ever, remember, in the Orthodox Church, remember this. We talk about what we're going to celebrate. We celebrate it. And then we talk about what we just celebrated. Right? So we're always kind of pushing it. Now we're celebrating. So on Christmas Day, we celebrate. We receive communion. It's great. Fast is broken. Go eat meat. Do whatever you want to do. Well, don't be like the pagans. There's actually one of the sermons from St. Gregory, our namesake here, saying, don't celebrate Christmas like the pagans and get drunk and do all that stuff. You already back then, he's warning the people. So anyway, so then we... And that day, by the way, we remember the Magi and the shepherds. Okay? All that's the kings and all that's all remembered on that Christmas day. So, do you think we're done? No. Because now we got to talk about what we just did. So in the church, we have 3, Christmas Day, the second day of the feast, and the third day of the feast. Now in the Orthodox Church, whenever you have a major feast day, the next day is always dedicated to someone who's important to the whole story. Right? So who's important to the story of Christmas? Mary. Right? Can't kind of have it without her. So the second day of Christmas is dedicated to the Virgin Mary and her part in the story. I will not be having services on these 2 days. Just to let you know. I should, and I feel guilty about it, but I'm not. And then, interestingly, the third day of Christmas is dedicated to, anybody know? St. Stephen. Yeah, so you know that Christmas hymn on St. Stephen's Day, da, 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 it comes from that, the 3-day cycle of Christmas. And St. Stephen is celebrated on the third day after Christmas, not because of what he has anything to do with the Christmas story necessarily, but who is St. Stephen known for? What is he famous for?
First martyr.
The first martyr. The first witness to Christ. And so he is celebrated as being a witness to all this reality. Isn't that interesting? So, and we're fast free until January 5th. Anyway.
Do you do a service for St. Stephen or no?
No, not this year. I can, but I'm not. I have a limited choir, and I can only do so many services before I start getting a look. And I'm already getting a look about the 6:30 Christmas Eve vigil, so I'm pushing it on that one. So I have to get me more people to sing, and then we can do it. Okay? Yeah. Do you think we're done with the story yet? Of course not. So then we have the Sunday after Christmas, right? The Sunday after Christmas, which has a fascinating history. It is called the Sunday of the righteous ones. And who are the righteous ones, you may ask? David the king, James the brother of the Lord, and Joseph the betrothed. Joseph, the husband, the protector of Mary. Why are they called the righteous ones? Because David prophesied the coming of Christ, Joseph protected Christ, and James ensured that the church would continue after Christ died and rose from the dead. I'm going to tell you a fascinating quick story. Two quick stories. So I was I studied for a summer in Jerusalem, and part of the studying was that you went to these different Holy Land sites and into Egypt and all other places. And I got to, I went to Bethlehem, where I saw a riot between Palestinians and Israeli soldiers. It was great. I felt like I'm back in the military again, right in the midst of it. And I went into the church in Bethlehem, which is one of the oldest churches. And when I got in there, you had an Armenian monk fighting with a Greek monk over who got to sweep to what section of the church. I'm saying, isn't just wonderful? So much peace in this land. But then you go down, because the church is built over the cave where the manger. That's why we always show it as a cave, because that's what they used caves for, right? As mangers and stuff. And you have all that. So I'm standing there. I was a deacon then, and still a seminarian, so I'm just in my black cassock and just quietly praying, the place where Christ is born. And these obnoxious Americans come in. Oh my God, look at this. Let's sing Christmas carols, everyone. And here, take a picture next to this is the manger here. And then, look at all these Orthodox things. Why are they doing all this, right? And it's just decoration, Finally, I just sort of went, could you have some dignity? And they looked at me because I'm this weird guy who speaks, perfect English. And this is a holy place. Could you please just bring it down a little bit, right? So I got them angry. But unfortunately, that's the way people think about these sacred spaces, right? So, story of the righteous one. So if you go to Nazareth, there was always known to be two churches in the early church in Nazareth. One church, they knew where it was. The second church got lost through war and other things, and they lost its location. So there were a bunch of nuns who always lived in the house of the righteous one. Everyone knew that for time immemorial, it was known as the house of the righteous one. So one day, they're doing renovations. This was not that long ago, maybe 40 or 50 years ago. And they broke through the floor, and they found out that there was a cave underneath where they were living. And you can just picture them. They lowered this little nun, down the road, and she got in there, and it was actually part of a where they buried people. And there was an Orthodox bishop, etc., and all that. And they come around the corner and they find an altar table in a cave with a communion spoon on it. Right? I saw the spoon, like we use for communion, right? And they found the lost church, which was the church of where Joseph lived. If you were Orthodox, you would say, of course, Joseph is called the righteous one. So of course that would be the place where the church was. Everyone knew it as that place. And so you can go and see that place now, which was the missing church. So sometimes people talk about the holy tradition in the church. It proves to be true so many times. So do you think we're done yet? No. So, if you count from December 25th, count 8 days. And what does that bring you to? December 25th plus 8 brings you to January 1st. See, someone's got math. You were way off, weren't you? January 1st besides being the New Year, and also the Feast of St. Basil, is also known as the circumcision of Christ. Because in Jewish tradition, the child is circumcised on the 8th day. Christ being born a Jew, he would of course be circumcised. So we actually have a service celebrating, which is important too, again, to prove his humanity. So January 1st is not only the New Year and the Feast of St. Basil the Great, but it's also the circumcision. Do you think we're done? No. So we already counted the 12 days of Christmas, which leads us to Theophany, right? The baptism of Christ, right? So we got that on the first, the 12 days of, that's what it means. Do you think we're done yet? No, we're almost done. Count, I'm not going to make you do this. Count 40 days from December 25th, and that will bring you to...
March 16th.
No, not even close.
April 1st.
February 2nd.
40 days?
48.
So January 7th?
No, December 25th.
Oh.
40 days. February 2nd. That is the feast of the meeting of the Lord. The tradition, the Jewish tradition, is that they bring the child to the temple to be dedicated to God.
Dedicated.
What?
Define dedicated.
To be offered to God.
Oh.
We'll get back to that in a second. So that's why 40 days after the birth of Mary is her entrance to the temple. 40 days after the birth of Christ is him being presented to the temple. Remember, that's when Simeon the elder holds him and says, Lord, now, it was promised you would see the Savior and all that stuff. The Orthodox Church continues that. On the 8th day after after a child is born, the priest will come, if he's invited, and he will name the child, which is what the circumcision would be, the naming of the child. And 40 days after the child is born is when the priest should be baptizing the child. Right? It's the same, it's sort of that fulfillment of all those things. Do you think we're done? No, we are. So think about this. This cycle started in March and went all the way through to February. Isn't that fascinating? And all of them in keeping and fulfillment of what it is that we're celebrating. All right, so we already explained that, we explained that, and we're getting short on time. Look at that. So any questions now?
I think Laura brought up a good point about the naming. After
Yeah.
circumcision. Go back to that. So the tradition was circumcision, same day naming.
Yeah.
Then 40 days later. So they don't name, they're born, no name.
No, he's offered, he's dedicated. The child is dedicated to that. But
I'm so good. Kill? No. You say offer, that's where you're
No.
got lost.
you bring it to the temple. Were you at the baptisms I've done?
Briefly. Just
What's the last thing I do on the baptism is I bring the child into the altar and I present
I'm
it.
confusing offer with dedicated.
Dedicated.
That's
We call it dedicated. Yeah. So we're offering the child. No, we're not killing
That's what I was
children.
saying.
No human sacrifice here, okay? What? We're not Canaanites. There you go. So, no, we're offering the child. The Jewish people would offer the child's life, saying, here is now, how do I put it?
You see?
What? You pick up the child, and the only thing greater is than yourself is God. We're offering you to God. So,
And would the priest assign a name, or would the parents assign a name?
the parents. Yeah. That's why there was a big controversy when, for example, John the Baptist,
Right.
and they said his name would be John, and he's like, but there's no one in your family named John, but that's going to be his name, right? Because it's all part of that sort of thing, right? So, Old Testament temple worship, temples destroyed, that falls away, but it's found in its fullness now in the church, which then takes those and takes it to the next section. Because no longer do we require the circumcision, right, from Acts 5. Well, you can, but not for religious reasons. And we no longer offer a child in a temple to God. We literally baptize the child and dedicate the child to God. So it's all fulfilled. With me?
I am.
Okay. Does that explain your...
It does, yeah. I misconstrued the offer of the dedicate.
Okay.
Whoa.
Got to get that Roman Catholic stuff out of your
I
brain.
do.
Yeah.
So Christmas Eve is a strict fast day. So
Yeah, so we have it. So Christmas Eve, Eve of Theophany, Eve of Annunciation, a couple of other days are strict fast days. So what does that mean? That means you really shouldn't eat anything from Christmas Eve or from that morning until the evening. And just enough to kind of get you through. Now, there are a couple of traditions that come around. The Italians have, what, the 12 fishes? 7 fishes? 7 fishes. In the Orthodox, my family's tradition, which is the Carpatho-Russian, Ukrainian, we have the Holy Supper. So that night before church, you have 12 dishes, all fasting dishes, including one where you dip a piece of garlic in salt and eat it to remember the bitterness, and you have the special bread you dip in honey to remember the sweetness, and then you have all these things which are usually based around cabbage, potatoes, and prunes. We may be a poor people, but, everything kind of goes right through. But there's all different, it's all deeply vegetarian, basically vegan. We were vegan before they even figured it out. But anyway, so those are certain. In Serbian tradition, they'll actually put straw around the kitchen table, and they'll bring a log in and plate, and that'll be the Yule log. That's the family has to bring the log into the church, into the house. So there's some beautiful traditions about it. On New Year's Day, the Greek tradition is the vasolopatus, which is a special Greek bread. It's really good, but you have a coin in there. Whoever gets the coin has good luck for the year. So there's all different customs that kind of grow out of it. And they all have their basis in religious roots, right? That's the key. Many of these countries that are Orthodox, it's all part of that way of celebrating. So the 7 fishes is absolutely, although it's a strict fast day, so we wouldn't eat fish with a backbone. I won't explain that. But the 7 fishes is rooted in that idea of the strict fast, right? Just like the Carpatho-Russian Holy Supper. It's rooted in that custom. So if you see those type of things pop up, they're just pious customs. Other questions? No? So there will be books, so when you come to the services, grab the book and follow along. Read the incredible hymns that were put together, and they are amazing. So I'm going to leave you with a hymn from St. Isaac of Syria. All right, so St. Isaac of Syria, very famous in the church. What was he, 7th century, 8th century, something like that. So this is a poem he wrote on the Christmas Eve. This nativity night bestowed peace on the whole world, so let no one threaten. This is the night of the most gentle one. Let no one be cruel. This is the night of the humble one. Let no one be proud. Now is the day of joy. Let us not revenge. Now is the day of God's will. Let us not be mean. In this day of peace, let us not be conquered by anger. Today the bountiful impoverished himself for our sake. So rich one, invite the poor to your table. Today we receive a gift for which we did not ask. So let us give alms to those who implore and beg us. This present day cast open the heavenly doors to our prayers. Let us open our door to those who ask our forgiveness. Today, the divine being took upon himself the seal of our humanity in order for humanity to be decorated by the seal of divinity. Isn't that beautiful? It's incredible. So, enjoy. If one of the books I recommend, Father Hopko, who was the priest here, and the dean of the seminary, he has two books. He has the Winter Pascha and the Lenten Spring. And there are 40 readings. So it's beautiful. You can go through each reading is like 4 or 5 pages. And it kind of reflects on the themes as you go through it. But isn't that interesting how he titled that? It didn't come from him. It came from a Russian theologian who called the 3-day feast that we're about to go through the Winter Pascha. Pascha means Passover. It's a mini kind of reflection of what we'll celebrate for Pascha, the resurrection of Christ. So keep that in your mind as you do that. We have copies of this down in our library. You can find it anywhere, and it's well worth reading. Here we are a couple of days before Christmas, so I tell you about you now. I'll give you readings. So, any other questions? Thank you all. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. It is truly meet to bless you, Theotokos, ever blessed and most pure, and the Mother of our God. More honorable than the cherubim, more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without corruption, you gave birth to God, the Word, true Theotokos. We magnify you. Through the prayers of the Holy Fathers of Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. Christ be glorified.